Welcome to Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching, the podcast that builds on conventional wisdom and adds a fresh perspective on this ever-evolving field of coaching.
Are you fed up with advice that doesn't really get to the heart of the matter or really get you?
Whether you're a reluctant or seasoned leader, this podcast is for you.
Embark on a journey of actionable insights, harness untapped potential, and learn to develop a mindset that will transform you permanently.
Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching, where we shatter boundaries and awaken the confident and compassionate leader within.
Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching.
Y'all see how exciting it is.
I set us up. Now we got to prove ourselves to be exciting. Which, by the way, the name of the podcast will be changing in the future, so we'll keep you updated. But we're shortening the title to Leadership Coaching
Podcast. Yep, the Leadership Coaching Podcast. So we're looking into all that right now. Hopefully we can make all those changes.
Yes.
Have a new website and all of this. That's exciting.
There you go.
For us, anyhow.
We fulfilled that. Well, I think it is very exciting, the topic that we have for today, which is about the self with a capital S. So let's first distinguish that. And we want to talk about, this is a huge topic. So we're going to focus on the relevance of the self to leadership and to coaching, right? So let's distinguish the self, the capital S, from our normal usage of the word self with a small s. What do we mean?
We're not meaning like self-centered, self-obsessed, selfish. We're not talking about that here. What we're really talking about is a question that philosophers and thinking men and women have been considering for ever, since the invention of thinking. Who am I? Right? We're not going to, in this podcast episode, we're not going to answer that question, especially. We might have some opinions about it, maybe. But the question, who am I, is, I think, an important question to answer for ourselves individually.
Right. Well, the Delphic Oracle, which has had a big impact on Western society, said that is the question to ask.
And how did you say that? Delphic Oracle?
Yeah.
How does that state the question? The Oracle state the question.
Well, the Oracle told Socrates and many other people to know thyself. Who are you? And what are you?
Right. So when I first started going to AA meetings in 1982, there was this guy in Kalispell, Montana, and it never failed. Didn't matter what the topic was. He would always talk about what the topic was not. I loved it. I just really enjoyed this guy. So if we were talking about acceptance, let's say his name was George. George would say, I'm George and I'm an alcoholic. And I want to talk about what acceptance is not. This is not compliance. Acceptance is not. And so he would go on, and I loved it. It really got my thinking machine going in a different direction. And I need that. Boy, did I need that. I think maybe we could entertain that for just a bit. Who am I not?
Very good. So we're still on this question. So we'll get to its relevance to coaching and to leadership in a second, but this is helpful. What it's not, you said it's not about selfishness or self-centeredness. What all that points to is the ego. So what it's not is the ego.
Well, let's take a moment with the ego too, because I believe that word's very confusing. Oh, well, that's just your ego. Think that kind of a comment or thought about even myself, oh, that's just my ego. Points to the truth that we are trying to define right now.
Right.
That's not you. That's just your ego is really what that's saying.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of lands as a criticism, though. Well, if what is it to be criticized? What are we criticizing when we say that's just your ego? Essentially, what I feel when I'm considering that thought or that judgment is, oh, this is just me showing off. This is just me performing. This is just me hiding. This is just what I do to shroud myself so nobody actually sees who I am.
Which is one, yeah, that is definitely one angle on it for sure, and it's an important one. If you took the word just out of that sentence, it's just ego. Its ego is part of us. I mean, I don't want to adjust it. I don't want to lower it in any way. It is ego. It's not just ego is important. I mean, ego, we spend most of our lives in a conversation about what it means to me, what it's going to do to me, how well I'm doing, how I'm coming across. Like that, this is not to be lowered down to, oh, just ego. It's an really important part of who we are, and it needs to be looked at and studied and empowered. So I would just take it off the just ego list.
Right. Well,
and say, no, it's ego. It's important.
this is your ego. This is self. This is your ego. This is your true self. So,
yeah. And by the way, for those out there who have any exposure to yoga, the philosophy as well as the asanas, the yogic world for 6,000 years has divided the human being into three major parts: the self, the ego, and the body. So, just to keep it in perspective, there's also the body. So we're not just our body, we're not just our ego. And so what we're trying to get a focus on here is, well, what is that other, who am I besides that?
other than my ego, other than my body, who am I?
Right.
So how would you define ego then? I think we can assume that we all know what body is, but what is ego?
I don't want to be held to a definition, but that was an egoistic thing to say, not teistic, but istic. I would be really simplistic about this. I would say it's anything processed by mind.
Wow. Okay. Before we started today, you said, can we talk about spirituality? So is that the definition of spirituality then? We've got spirituality and then mind?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So anything processed by mind would be ego. Anything not processed by mind would be self. And that's more related to spirituality.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, there are, the mind can help us see spirit or self, and spirit can give us things to think about as well. So there's crossover. There's not like a big wall of China between these two, but they are distinct. They're very different. So, like, for example, when, let's say you have a very rational choice in front of you. I don't know, maybe you're hiring somebody and you're looking at the pros and cons of this VP over that VP, for example.
Just coincidentally, what a great example.
Right. And you've got it down to a science, and you've got all of these pros and cons for each of them, and you're just adding up, the value of each of those pros and cons, and you could be very rational about it. And it says, well, we should pick this guy then. He won the rational race here. But then you sit and you think for a couple hours, and you're like, you know what? I really think I'd be better with that guy. Let's choose that one. Even though that one rationally stacks up, my intuition tells me this is going to be the one. Now that's choice, which it could be made by the body. Maybe you're hot on that person physically, right? Chemistry. They talked a lot about Harris's attraction to Wald's chemically. So there's that. That's not what we're talking about. And but it's a way that we choose, that we make judgments and inferences and have knowledge. It comes from somewhere else, a deeper, more universal kind of knowing.
Really interesting. Can I jump in with my really simplified version of the difference between ego and self?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to find my way back here because I'm really intrigued by what you've just shared too. As you were talking, I was thinking of some of the other things that I heard early in 12 step that blew my mind, given where I came from and how I thought of myself and human beings. When the very first time I heard or read someone say, I am a spiritual being having this physical experience, that was life changing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And now what just came into my head for the first time ever, it's not nearly as profound, but it is somewhat profound, is that I'm also a spiritual being that's having this mental experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And maybe that distinguishes the difference between that of the mind and that of the spirit, body, or of matter. For me, the simplified version is, and I thought of it this way before I was even introduced to IFS, and maybe it was because I'd already thought of it this way, I was easily able to embrace the concepts of a self and protectors and exiles. So I thought of it this way: who I really am is who I was born as, and there's probably been other episodes where I've said this. It's who I am today, and it's who I will be the day I leave the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And who I am, my true self, is whole, perfect, and complete. My perception of myself, though, changes over time. When I begin to think of myself as less than whole, perfect, and complete, for whatever reason, something's happened in my life, and I've now got an idea, a theory, that there's something about me that's less than whole, perfect, and complete.
Yeah.
I now have begun to develop an ego,
Yes.
an identity.
Yes.
Prior to identity, I just was.
That's right. I am the great I am.
Mhm, mhm. And
The self.
if you ask an infant who's now learned how to speak, who are you? They're not going to say I am, but they're not going to give you much of an answer either, unless they just really surprise you. They're not going to understand the question. What do you mean? Who am I?
Right.
Maybe by now they've gotten mama, dada, sister, brother,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they've learned to point at their nose when they say, "And who are you?" and or something. But it's these concepts and ideas that begin to formulate an identity of who we are. And the first level of identity, I believe, is shame. I identify as less than whole, perfect, and complete, which I use as a definition now for what is shame. Shame is the belief that I'm less than whole, perfect, and complete.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another layer of ego, let's just say, or identity, which is that part of the ego that's in charge of making sure that nobody finds out that I have shame.
Mm-hmm.
But now I present some version of myself to the world. I think Landmark calls it the act, so that I'm lovable, acceptable, and belong. But none of that is who I am. It's just who I'm trying to convince others that I am, or who I'm convinced that I am.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's how I think about it.
So two things. Start with that your last observation. So this is where a lot of people get stuck. It's like, wait, I've never heard about this self thing before, this whole perfect being. Like, and now you're introducing, you're saying that's who I am, and all the things that I've thought about myself up till now is not who I am. That's kind of hard to take.
It is.
But I think that shows why it's so important for us to access the self within ourselves and within our lives, because that's what allows perspective and different actions than we've been taking. A whole new realm opens up when you can see that all of that thinking, that's limiting the who it's not you, it's limiting the view of who you really are, which is this whole perfect and complete being. And then that opens up the second thing I wanted to say, which is that one of the ways I think about it is that the who we really are, the self with a capital S, is the one that does the choosing once we've become aware of ego. Like once we can see, oh, that thought about me that I'm not capable, that thought about me that I'm not good enough, that thought about me that nobody likes me, like none of that is really me. And when I can see that, now I'm at choice. Now I can either go on behaving as if all that stuff was true, or I could step out in a new direction. I could be bigger than those thoughts. I could live in a realm that is not defined by those thoughts. So it's this is, I think, why it's so important for leaders and in the coaching context to see like that moment when the coach says, do you realize that you're limiting yourself in some way, right? That puts you, you cannot but be your true whole complete self with the information that thought that you've been having is limiting this. Now you're a choice. You've got all the power.
Well, if you can find your way there,
Mhm.
that's the challenge. So it begins intellectually. Oh, I now see that I'm limiting myself by thinking of myself in these limiting ways.
Mhm.
Now that I know that and know that I can have more power if I can let go of these limiting ways of thinking, how do I let go of these limiting ways of thinking so that I can get to that power?
Mhm.
That's the next challenge, isn't it?
Maybe. And why I say that is because I have often found in the living of my own life, not to mention observing my clients, that sometimes all it takes is seeing what you're not. I don't have to know how to go on from there necessarily. That's going to be important information, no question. But just the seeing puts me at choice. I know I'm not that. So whatever comes out of that knowing is self.
That knowing that you're referring to is, I'm thinking of it in terms of insight. Landmark education talks about, I don't know what I don't know.
Mhm. Mhm.
Insight comes from the realm of, insight is not learning something new. Insight is learning that what you know is not so. And that learning comes about by realizing that something is true and can only be true if what I think is true is not.
Say that again.
I don't know that I can. I'm trying to define insight. I believe that insight is realizing something is true, and at the very same time realizing that what I thought is true is not. There's not room for both of them to be true.
Mhm.
Something is true, therefore what I thought was true cannot be.
Mhm.
And now I think I'm at a choice point, or maybe it's just obvious. Maybe once I see something as the truth and it's presented before me next to a belief, which is only a theory of what could be true. It's
Mhm.
just I've thought of it so much that it feels like the truth to me until the actual truth shows up. I think that's what an insight is.
Uh-huh. Okay. Um, no, so just a couple of examples here, maybe. I had a very accomplished client who worked at Stiefel Nicholas, and I just at the end of the coaching call, I just said to him, it just sounds like you're not enjoying your work. This is a general comment, obviously, but that reflection changed his life. Like, he hadn't seen that he was being not enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
The ego was created that there's something to not enjoy here. And as soon as I pointed that out, that who he was being was not self, but a complaint about life, he immediately shifted. In fact, we had maybe one or two sessions after that, and he was freed. He didn't need me anymore. All he needed was that reflection so that he was not going to continue to be, he chose, like, I'm not going to continue to be not enjoying. That's not me.
That's amazing. That's
It is.
great, powerful example of what can happen with insight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you see what you're missing. He didn't know that he didn't know that until you pointed it out.
Right.
Once you pointed it out, he saw it, it aligned. And another thing that comes out of what you just said in that story is that, how do you know that you're actually being yourself rather than being your ego?
Mm-hmm.
One of the qualities that show up in self is joy.
Mm-hmm.
Said to him, you're not experiencing one of the qualities of being in self. You're not enjoying joy.
Right. Right.
And he saw it. Oh yeah, that's missing, and I want that. What am I doing here? Yeah, that's great. Great story.
Yeah, and it's typical too. I mean, just last Thursday, I had a conversation with a client, and he had it that there was just no other way but to be upset about the noise that his neighbors make with their firecrackers all year long, not just on the 4th of July. There's just nothing else to do. It was like fate. And when I pointed that out, that, he was limiting his thinking in that very way, well, he got on the phone. He talked to the city manager and to there was some other neighborhood advocate that he had a conversation with. He got into action, doing things from self that he couldn't even see, as long as he was still being his ego.
Right. Which probably included, look how they're victimizing me here, until somebody says you sound like a victim. And then the part that was managing, not sounding like a victim, was seen completely through.
Right.
And that forced him to take action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it didn't force him to, but he, like you said, he was that choice. Now, do I want to continue to act as a victim, pretend like I'm not, and then be at the mercy of? No, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Now that I see a path to my power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've just got probably 7 or 8 minutes left here before I have a hard stop, Marty. And I want to bring this to, what's the importance, and you've already begun to bring us in this direction. The value of this conversation around coaching and leadership, as I see it, is that when we can help people see that they're somehow giving away their power, where they're and helping them to see that they're limiting themselves, and that if they can step into who they really are, their self, their true self, then they can have their power back.
Mm-hmm.
Then we've done our jobs as coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And as leaders, whether we're leading people to help them get there themselves, or we're leading ourselves to get there, if we see as leaders that somehow we've limited our own power,
Mm-hmm.
we can step back into our power by recognizing where we are acting from a false identity, and let go of that act, see what's in the way of just being our true and authentic self. In the story that you just told, the guy lived with his neighbors setting off fireworks all year long, probably because he was afraid of confronting them.
That's
Probably
right.
because he was afraid that there just wasn't any other way around it. He had
That's right.
limited and couldn't see it at all. He
Mm-hmm.
had to deal with his own fear
Mm-hmm.
and somehow get past it. Any idea how he did that? Was it a process, or was it just as simple as, oh, I see I'm giving my power away?
Well, there was a coaching process that went into it. Yes.
Yeah.
And then there was a process of, planning then what to do about it once he recognized he had the power too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
So
is,
it could happen in an instant, I suppose, but this one involved a process.
and it usually does. In fact, I'll say that the most exciting coaching sessions that I have with my clients are the ones where we get past the fear, step
Mhm.
into power, and now explore what it looks like to be in action.
Can I give another quick example?
Yeah.
So I'll be quick with this. I remember,
You don't have to be too quick.
okay, when Rudy Giuliani got into a bunch of trouble, what was it, 2 years ago or something? I don't know exactly when that was. And he made this famous statement, like truth is not truth. They think this is truth. We think this is truth. Truth is not truth. And I was talking to a client, it just happened to be, and the client said, well, there's something. I mean, he said, I get that, what's true for you might not be true for me, but there's something about this that really bothers me, he said. Because your truth could lead to an accident. Your truth could lead to a very dire situation where my truth is leading us to make more money and to be happier. So there's got to be some way that we can distinguish, a better truth than a worse one. And that, I say, was the self speaking.
Yes.
Because there's nothing in the brain, right, that tells us that you want to choose truths that lead to better conclusions. No, the brain doesn't tell us. That's known. That's like an eternal truth. It's true on its face. It's self-evident. And so that's something like that's a truth from the self rather than from a human.
It's only self-evident to those. It's only self-evident to those who can see the truth. The truth is the truth. And I don't. You and I both know Rudy Giuliani was trying to create a new reality. The reality is there's only one truth, and for most of us, we rarely, if ever, actually even get a glimpse of what that is. In the meantime, we're operating on beliefs, concepts that come. We're operating on either beliefs and concepts that come as close as we can to what might be true, or we're just living from our true selves and we know what's true. It's the moment we try to put definition and language to what is truth that we step away from it.
And that's this. What you're saying is what I'm saying. This is like this is intuitive. It's something that you can't teach somebody. It's just obvious. It's eternal truth. It's in the realm of the self.
It's obvious if you can see it.
I mean, I'm not talking about the epistemological getting there to believing it and seeing it. I'm talking about it in itself can't be questioned.
That's right. Yeah. One more thing I want to throw in here. In the busyness of propping up and maintaining and sustaining an image, an identity, a false self, we use up a very limited amount of access to resources. We really limit our access to resources when we're busy propping up and sustaining a false image.
Yeah.
When that drops away, and when we can just relax into being who we actually are, we gain access to resources that otherwise we just don't even know exist.
Right.
And
Like the truth.
Like the truth. And the truth will set you free. The truth is empowering. All of that is so true. Ego, I associate with effort, trying, and exhaustion. Living a life from ego is absolutely exhausting, and it's sewn through with a thread of suffering. Whereas if I can be my true authentic self, and this is the ultimate goal for me of helping my coaching clients and living my own life, is be my true authentic self. Because if I can, then life now begins to look a lot more like ease, flow, and energizing. I'm energized by the experience of being in my true authentic self. I'm exhausted by the effort it takes to be an ego.
Right. Right. There we see solutions that we wouldn't otherwise
Right.
see.
Absolutely.
So just to, and I totally agree with you. Even hard to put into words. It's like there's a knowing, there's a deeper seeing, there's a oneness with what's real that is available when you're not preoccupied with yourself, that helps solve I mean, a great example of this is if you read the New Testament, you see Jesus coming up with solutions like, what? How did he think of that? Everybody else in the crowd is like, you can't do that. And he did it anyway, right?
Yeah.
Because he was coming from that fully sourced self.
Yes. Yeah. Very good. Great conversation again. We need to wrap up.
Okay.
All right. So the domain that we're going to be using now for the podcast, if you want to listen to this and other episodes of Leadership Coaching Podcast, is leadershipcoachingpodcast.com.
There you go.
Yes. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
That concludes another episode of Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights to fuel your leadership journey.
Remember, true leadership is not about you. It's about empowering others.
Take your insights to heart and cultivate a leadership mindset that will transform you from within.
Thank you for joining us on this quest to leadership excellence. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes where we delve deeper into the art of leadership.
Until next time, remember that you have the power to lead with confidence and compassion from the inside out.